Okay, so it's a bit of a strange day for me, but I'm not feeling well. But I at least wanted to get a video out. Yesterday I didn't do anything, mostly because it was a holiday for schools, which means everyone was around. And there's like no place where I can find peace to just get work done. So it's one of those things where it's just like, you know what, you might as well just enjoy yourself. So I did. I went and saw 1917, got some grocery shopping done, and things that needed doing that did not require me sitting at the computer working. I just kind of did those things instead. Anyway, so the Mary Sue wrote an article, The Problems with Redemption by Death. Now, I actually kind of don't have a real problem with this article because in a way I understand the point that they're making, and the point that they're making has to do a lot with storytelling, and it has to do, like for them it's kind of like a little bit whiny because it's characters that they like that don't get the redemption arc that they feel like they should get. But I'm looking at it from the aspect of a storyteller. And I do kind of agree with them that it is an easy thing that movies and television do, that just kind of, you have a bad guy, you have an anti-hero, you're having them go through a story. People like them, so you keep them around. People want a redemption of them, and you kind of like toe that line of whether or not they should have a redemption. And then, that redemption is them dying at the end. Now, I think part of the reason that it's so focused on right now with the Mary Sue probably more has to do with the fact that it's the character that they like. But I think it's more than just the fact that, it was Kylo Ren who died. I think it like for me, it just kind of points out the badness of the sequel trilogy in the first place, like the silliness of what Disney did, because I saw The Last Jedi and I knew that there was going to be no redemption or no real redemption for Kylo Ren anyway, because the best time to have started it would have been in movie 2, in The Last Jedi. And, Rian Johnson pretty much ended it with, it's just going to be good versus bad again, with Rey being good and Kylo Ren being bad. So you were only ever going to have a terrible redemption arc in the first place, just by the mess that movie was. And like one of the characters that they pointed out that had a really good redemption arc is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And they're absolutely correct. I love, that redemption arc that he went through, that people got through the process. And, but that had to do a lot with good storytelling. I would say even on Dragon Ball Z, where Vegeta, he never really kind of, like, you never really get the sense that he ever fully accepts himself as a full-on hero, but, you get his redemption arc where, he makes the decision to sacrifice himself. And I think that that's kind of the thing that, when it comes to storytelling, there is something powerful about sacrificing your life for someone else. I mean, there just is. There's a powerful statement in that. And sometimes the power of that statement, it doesn't need, or it shouldn't be diluted with, people saying, oh, well, this character should have a happy ending, because let's just be honest. And I'm sorry if this is kind of like a mess because I'm thinking my way through this, but I don't think that, the redemption arcs of the bad guy turning good, like the dying part is not the problem. And I really don't believe that that's the problem that people have. I think it is the idea of it's done badly, because I think back to the original trilogy and I think back to Darth Vader. We don't necessarily get a redemption arc with him. Like, we don't ever really get a time where we see Darth Vader questioning, but we accept at the end that, he sacrifices his life to save his son. And we're content with that. And we're saddened that he dies, but we're glad that he had that chance at redemption. That's why for me, even when I go back and I watch the monstrosity of, the heavily, or not heavily, but the added CGI, original trilogy. Like, one of the only successful parts for me is at the end of Return of the Jedi, where you have, Anakin showing up as Force Ghost. I like that because that kind of makes it even more satisfying. It makes it a little bit more satisfying because it is like the completion of Darth Vader's redemption arc. He went from a baddie to big baddie, to big baddie that sacrifices himself. And then at the end, he gets that redemption and you see, okay, he had that redemption. And, realistically, that really kind of is what people do. I mean, that is what people do need. But I mean, I think about it and I think about why I'm not really a fan of a lot of these modern television shows and movies and things like that. And I know it comes down not to just storytelling, but it comes down to character. And I know, like, right now for me, because I'm going back, and looking at a lot of my own characters. And, there's one character that I'm thinking about in particular that probably is going to be a lot more of that kind of like redemption arc character where they're not a bad guy, but they're not a good guy either. And there's the kind of change and redemption and whatnot that he has to go through the process as well. So I certainly get where this Kimberly Terasaki is coming from, where, in talking about, the redemption by death, like it being a trope, because it goes back to just what I see regularly, which is lazy writing, because it's easy. It's something that people recognize. If you take a villain and you make them all moody, people will want to insert, redemption. And then if you kill them off at the end and you just do it by them saving the hero because another big baddie comes into play, then, there's your immediate redemption arc. And somehow they've gotten so used to that. But it's sort of like, it's like my feelings of shoehorned in romance scenes. The movie doesn't call for it, but you just insert it because, you tell us, it's what you expect. And the reality is, but it doesn't fit the story narrative. Therefore, I didn't ask for that. And I'm not looking for that. And that is something that actually, like, the scene I'm thinking about right now is actually a scene from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And that is a scene that does still bother me to this day every time I see it, because it really, like, I understand it's establishing the relationship between, it's like you're establishing the relationship, but at the same time, it's sort of like you're doing it badly, because this is a scene that does not need to exist, because where the story was going, where you inserted this just completely takes you out of where we were, so that you can throw in this love scene and remind us, oh, these two characters are in love. And then we go back to, the important scenes. And like, I don't know. I mean, it is just, it's the laziness. And yeah, I know this. Like, I hate that this is a rambling video. But I do think that it's extremely just important that even if it's, even if I argue it badly, that it's just understood that from a storyteller's point of view, everything is about the character in the story. And I'm coming to really understand that a lot of it really has to do with the character and the idea of, like, we know that for Disney's trilogy, they didn't have a story. And that's part of the reason why there was such a complete mess. But I think worse is they didn't understand their characters, because a lot of times if you understand your characters, it's much easier to find their story. I still maintain they were very bad to Finn, because there was so much there in Finn's background, in Finn's story. They could have had, if you were going to force a new character on us, I think he still would have been the way to go, just because of the richness of the character that they gave us from the very beginning, and because they were too afraid to make Mary Ray Sue anything but perfect, that really kind of damaged anything that they can do. It damaged any kind of real growth, character development, or anything like that. And it made it impossible to get to know her. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. Like, at this point, it's really about not just getting to know your characters. It is about getting to know your characters, but it's getting to know them so well that when you insert them in the story world, you know what they're going to do. You know how the story is going to flow. And if you have a character that you want to do a redemption arc with, that's increasingly more important, because we never really got the understanding of Kylo's motivation to become, to move to the dark side. And so the conflict that we have, or the conflict that he had, it's sort of like, well, he wants to be like his grandfather. Okay, but why? And so there were too many answers. There was too many questions that did not have answers. And if there's one thing that I kind of want taken away with this video, and thank you if you've listened to this far in. If there's one thing that I want to be taken away, it is that idea of knowing your characters through and through, knowing their motivations, knowing what makes them tick, and understanding that if you are creating something, that you have to understand your characters in those three-dimensional terms, because flat characters they're not entertaining. They're not entertaining. And that's really, why I see Hollywood having a much harder time, because the more they go with agenda versus good storytelling, the more they lose character. The more they go with just flat character, the more that will be a struggle because they will lose that richness that, you know, allows people to identify with certain characters. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I really, like, when I clicked on it, I did not think that I was going to have moments where I kind of agreed. I mean, like, because it doesn't really matter what the article says. It's more the idea behind it for me. But I do agree with them that the redemption arc for Zuko was very successful because we got to see it and we got to see his struggle and we got to see that, you know, though he was the antagonist, he was, you know, guilt-ridden himself. He had problems. He had issues. Like, you know, for him, he did see himself as the hero of his own story. And that, I think, is where that's what people kind of forget in telling stories, that no matter what, your hero is the hero of the story, but your villain also thinks that they're the hero of their story, so that they still have, like, their motivations and things like that are still in their minds. They're rational, they're relevant, and you can't forget that, because if you lose touch with your antagonist's motivations, you will lose touch with a rich and, you know, great character, even if you kill them at the end, because it's sort of like, if we really get to know them, if we have struggled with them, if we've seen the redemption and they don't get, you know, the kind of happily ever after at the end because they're, you know, they sacrifice themselves for someone else. I mean, you care a lot more because you got that time to attach to that redemption story. So if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share, do all of that. And even though it does not feel like a Tuesday to me, I have plans to do one more video